Uh, Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Let's give a couple minutes to these people who may join us soon. Then we can start our webinar. Let's give some more seconds, then we can start the webinar. Seems like some other people will join soon. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the 35th anniversary of Christian Peacemaker Team's webinar. Thanks for your dedication to learn about the Kurdish journalism and the Kurdish journalists' resistance and the obstacles and the barriers that they are facing in their journalism work. We're gonna discuss this topic. We're gonna discuss the journalism, Kurdish journalism between suppression and resistance topic with our respected guests and independent journalists, Kamal Chomani and Niyaz Abdulla. Kamal is speaking from Germany. Niyaz Abdullah would be with us, and she's speaking from Iraqi Kurdistan. So I'm Kamaran Othman. I'm from Iraqi Kurdistan. I'm working with Christian Peacemaker teams, Iraqi Kurdistan team. I have been working as a journalist for several years for multiple independent news papers in Iraqi Kurdistan. I would like to thank my colleagues, Julie Brown and Alicia, the outreach coordinator for CPT and the development coordinator of CPT, and Lucas Ferla, that is Christian Peacemaker Team's Iraqi Kurdistan team project or program support coordinator, that they will be with us tonight as a support team. And thank you so much, Muhammad Salah Mahdi, my colleague, that he will provide translation for Niyaz Abdulla from English to Kurdish, and he will provide translation to us from Kurdish to English. For these people that they maybe new and they don't know about CPT, I can just share a little bit about CPT and our program in Iraqi Kurdistan. CPT is a human rights organization that is building partnership to transform violence and oppression. We have several teams in Colombia, Iraqi Kurdistan, Lesbos, Palestine, and Turtle Island. CPT Iraqi Kurdistan team was founded in 2006. We are collaborating with these families, villagers, and farmers who are threatened and impacted by the cross-border bombings. We are also documenting the human rights violations against the Kurdish journalists and human rights defenders. We are accompanying them in the court testimony, running public actions, and collaborating with their families whenever, whenever they would face kidnapping or arresting. Before we start our conversation about the Kurdish journalism, we would love to know who's joining us. So feel free to put your name and where are you joining us from. The chat box. You can write your name and tell us where are you from. Okay, so maybe I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Kurdish journalism and give you an overview about the Kurdish journalism. So the first Kurdish journal or newspaper was found in 1898 in Cairo, in Egypt. It was found by a Kurdish politician, author, and journalist Miqdad Madhat Badr Khan. He was originally from Kurdish territories in Turkey, because in that time the Ottoman Empire was restraining the Kurdish revolutions and the Kurdish political movements in Turkey. The family of Miqdad Madhat Badr Khan, they were forced to go to Cairo and run their political movement against the Ottoman Empire. So he found the first Kurdish news paper there. It was called Kurdistan. So in that newspaper, he and his colleagues, they were talking about the Kurdish struggle in this area, in Mesopotamia area. They were encouraging people to learn about the Kurdish language, because in that time it was very difficult to people to speak in their language and to know about the Kurdish history. They were telling people the Kurdish history. They were encouraging them to learn about the Kurdish language, and also they were raising awareness in the international community. So they were not only writing in Kurdish, they were writing in Persian, in Turkish, and in France as well. So the first Kurdish journalism step started in this time, but the first Kurdish journalism that faced it, the Kurdish journalism faced the obstacles. It was in that time that the Sultan Abdulhamid, that he's the 34th of the Sultan Ottoman Empire. He was forcing the family of Miqdad Madhat Badr Khan in Istanbul. He was arresting his family members and also torturing them, even killing them. That's why he was forced. Miqdad Madhat Badr Khan, he was forced to go back to Istanbul and just give up with the journalism work. But after some years, he started to join a political movement again, to raise awareness and to fight for the Kurdish rights. From this time, the Kurdish newspapers was started finding and started to work in Bashur, in the south of Great Kurdistan. Some newspapers were found in the beginning of 19. That was it was based on the Kurdish revolutions. If you are dividing the Kurdish journalism for some phases, we can say the first phase was the Kurdish journalism in the south of Great Kurdistan. It was based on the Kurdish revolutions that Malik Mahmud, the first Malik of Kurdistan state, he in that time some newspapers was found. And then when the Kurdistan political parties, they were found in that time, some Kurdish newspapers also were found. And until until 1958, it was like that the nations from Iraq, they had a revolution in that time. So after that time, it was more freedom for the Kurdish journalists to found more medias and newspapers to speak about the Kurdish issues. But I can't say the situation of the Kurdish journalism, it was based on the situation of the political situation in this area. So the third phase of the Kurdish journalism was in 1991, that the Kurdish authority, or the Kurdish revolutionaries, they came down from the mountain, and the people inside of Iraqi Kurdistan, they had an uprising, and after that we had our own government in Iraqi Kurdistan. We were all optimistic in that time that maybe we will have a better government here, that they can provide more freedom for the people, for the journalists, that they can do their work. But in the beginning of the self-government, or in Iraqi Kurdistan, we have seen a lot of violation against the journalists, even kidnapping and also assassinating the journalists. After that time, the political situation was like that the Kurdistan regional government had been divided to two zones here, and these people that they were writing about the PDK, I mean the PDK and PUK, they are two main political parties here. They had civil war after the Kurdish uprising. These people that they were writing about the PDK zone, they had been assassinated, kidnapped, tortured, and forced. And these people from PDK zone were writing about PUK zone. They were also experiencing a lot of violation, kidnapping, and assassinating, and a lot of these things. And after 1990, the independent newspapers that they were not belonging to any political parties were found, but they faced a lot of oppression by the main political parties. There were not any political parties were supporting them, so they were just fight for their rights, and they were telling truth. They were telling truth, and also talking about the corruption inside of the political parties. So in Kurdistan, we have this expression. We are saying that in 93 years of the Kurdish journalism, that we were experiencing violence by the neighboring countries. It was not more than this violence that Kurdish journalists faced during the Kurdish authorities or Kurdistan regional government. So many journalists have been assassinated, have been kidnapped. Even we don't know about some journalists, where their destiny, where have been held, in which place, in which prison. So we have some journalists like Sardaj Othman, Kawa Germiani, Sorani Mahama, Widat Hussein, Shukri Rekani, Abdul Startar Sharif. They were these people that they were exposing corruption in Iraqi Kurdistan. They were talking about corruption. So they had been killed, they had been tortured. A lot of journalists had been tortured. So today we're gonna discuss about the Kurdish journalism state now in Iraqi Kurdistan. Before we start this conversation with our speakers, I would like to read the last article that Sardaj Othman, an independent journalist, he wrote in 2010. Then he was assassinated by one of the main political parties. Now they are running the government in Iraqi Kurdistan. After this article, he was assassinated. So in his articles, in the end of his article, Sardaj Usman, he said that I will continue to write until the last minute of my life. Let my friends put a full stop at the end of the sentence and let them start a new one. Today we have two journalists, Kamal Chomani and Niyaz Abdulla, that they fill a full stop in the end of the line and they started a new line. And they are very well-known journalists in Iraqi Kurdistan. So we're gonna discuss this topic with them. But before we gonna talk about that, so we have Q&A boxes. You can see in the down of your screen that you can put all the questions that you have. We will do our best to answer all these questions. If the time would not help us, we will do our best to answer your questions after the webinar via email. So we're gonna ask the first question to Niyaz Abdulla. Niyaz Abdulla, she's an independent journalist. She's the deputy of the Being Free or Azad Bun organization in Iraqi Kurdistan. She has been working as a journalist for many years, and she has been working in radio station as a presenter for 12 years in Radio Noah, that's an independent radio in Iraqi Kurdistan. So Niyaz, very welcome and thanks for your time in today's discussion. So I'm gonna ask you about that. After 123 years of the founding the first Kurdish newspaper, how do you see the state of the Kurdish journalism in Iraqi Kurdistan? And as an independent journalist, could you tell us about these main obstacles that you as an independent journalist and your friends are facing in their journalism work? Mike is yours.
زۆر سپاس کاک کامەران و هەروەها یادی 35 ساڵی ڕێکخراوی CPT پیرۆزەکەم بە تایبەت لە تیمی CPT و هەروەها بەرگریکارانی مافەکانی مرۆڤ لە شوێکی دنیا هەن بە تایبەت لە هەرێمی کوردستان.
Thank you so much, Kamaran, and hello everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, and I really like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to CPT and also to tell you that I'm to acknowledge the 35th anniversary of CPT, especially IKT.
هەروەها زۆر سپاس بۆ ئەو پێشەکی کە لەبارەی مێژووی ڕۆژنامەگەری کوردی بە پوختی خستە ڕوو.
And thank you so much for the debriefing about the Kurdish journalism, the history of the Kurdish journalism.
ئەمە دابەشکاریەکی ئاسان بوو بۆی ئێمە کە بتوانین لە دوای قۆناغی 30 ساڵ قسە بکەین، واتە 93 ساڵەکە کە پێشتر مێژووی ڕۆژنامەگەری کوردی بۆ لەبارەی قسە نەکەین بەڵکو لەبارەی 30 ساڵی هەرێمی کوردستانەوە بدوین.
So it was very helpful. It will give us an opportunity to talk about the stages of the Kurdish journalism after the 93 years being founded, which is in the last 30 years. That it's an opportunity for us to focus on that.
ئەو کۆسپانی کە لە بەردەم ڕۆژنامەوانی لە هەرێمی کوردستان هەن کۆسپی گەورن.
Those obstacles that we see it or face it here in Iraqi Kurdistan, they are great.
تەنانەت ئەگەر ئەو قۆناغی کە لە 30 ساڵ ڕۆژنامەوانی کوردی لە هەرێمی کوردستان پێی تێپەڕێ و بەراوردی بکەین بە 93 ساڵ و کاتی دەرچوونی یەکەم ڕۆژنامەی کوردی لە قاهیرە ئەکرێ بڵێین دۆخی ئێستا لە هەرێمی کوردستان بۆ ڕۆژنامەوانانی سربەخۆر لە هەمان ئاستی مەترسی سەردەمی عوسمانیەکانە.
I would definitely say if we compare the 30 years with the other 93 years, I would definitely say that the situation of the journalism and the journalists here in Iraqi Kurdistan, to compare with the other 93 years, which is those journalists have been worked during the Ottoman Empire, the situation of those journalists are much worse than that time.
و بەجۆرێکی تر لە دووبارەکردنەوەی ئەو قۆناغانە ئەچێت کە ڕۆژنامەکان بە شێوەیەکی نهێنی دەرئەچوون، چاپخانەکان بە شێوەیەکی نهێنی ئەهێندان وەگەوەی کە یەکێک لە ڕۆژنامەکان لە ئەشکەوتی جاسەنە دەرچووە.
It will be, we can definitely say that we are still having the same situations somehow in some other places, which is in the past or during the 93 years, there were some publication which is secretly they have to publish their work, which is actually I want to mention that when the first when there was a publication in a cave in Jasana cave.
بۆ نمونە ئێستا لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی کوردستان و لە باکووری کوردستان ئێمە تێبینێتین دەرکردنی ڕۆژنامە بە زمانی کوردی قەدەغەیە، بەڵام لە هەرێمی کوردستان ئەوەی کە قەدەغەیە باسی بکرێ گەرچی ڕۆژنامە بە زمانی کوردی دەرەچێ، بەڵام ڕۆژنامە ئەبێ لە ستایشی فاشیزم بێ نەک بۆ بەرگریکردن لە ئازادی و دیموکراسی.
So as we all know, until now, the Kurdish part in the east part of Kurdistan, which is the part which is in Iran, and the other part of Kurdistan, which is in Turkey, it's in Bakur when we say. So until now, it's forbidden to have any newspaper in the Kurdish languages. But at the same time, it's true here in Iraqi Kurdistan or in south of Kurdistan, we have freedom to write in Kurdish languages, but at the same time we have to only like to give appreciation to the fascisms or to the dictatorship who running this country.
زۆر بە کورتی گرنگترین ئەو تەحەدا و بەربەستانی کە لە بەردەمی ئێمە هەن خەمەڕوو.
Very briefly, I would like to put those challenges and the obstacles.
بەشێکی ئەو ئاڵنگاریە هەرە گەورانی کە لە بەردەممانە ئەوەیە کە بە تایبەت ئێستا دەسەڵات لە هەرێمی کوردستان بەرەنگاربوونەوەی میدیا و ئازادی ڕادەربڕینی کردو بە استراتیژ.
Which is one of them is the authority here, they have a strategic plan to really challenge and to stop the journalism work here in Iraqi Kurdistan and try to create as much as they can to stop those independent who are try to focus and talk about the issues that the other journalists are not talking about.
بەڵگەمان بۆم قسەیە یەکێکە لەوەی کە لە کابینین و بەرنامەی کابینین و بە هیچ شێوەیەک بایەخی بە ئازادی ڕادەربڕین نەداوە.
One of the evidence we have the new cabinet, which is it's called cabinet number 9 here in Iraqi Kurdistan. They really ignored the freedom of expression and the freedom of journalism work.
خاڵی دووەم لەم بارەیەوە توندوتیشترین ڕێکارەکان لە بەرامبەر ڕۆژنامەنووسان بە بەکارهێنانی یاسا پێڕەوەکرێت.
And also the second, we can say they use law to stop the work of the journalism work.
وەتا ئەم کاتێکی ئێمە قساکەین هەڕەشەکردن بە کوشتن بە ڕفاندن بە دەستدرێژی سێکسی لەسەر ڕۆژنامەنووسانی ژنبەردەوە.
Until this moment we are talking, still there are threatened by kidnapping and even sexual harassment against those women who are working for as a journalist.
دووەم ئاڵنگاری کە لە بەردەمی ئێمە جێبەجێنەکردنی یاساکانی کاری ڕۆژنامەگەری و یاسای دەستخستنی زانیاری و یاسای خانەنشینی و جێبەجێنەکردنی دەق و ناوەڕۆکی یاسای چاپەمەنیەکانە لە هەرێمی کوردستان.
Another obstacles, which is those not following the regulations of the journalism laws, which is one of the obstacle and issue, which is the Kyrgyz really ignored that. And also, for example, there is no law for the retirement of the journalism.
و یەکێک لەو خاڵانی دیکە لە بریەوەی کە ئەم یاسایانە بەکاربێن یاساکانی دیکە و سزادانی عێراقی بەکارهێنرێن و یاسای خراپ بەکارهێنانی ئامێرە ئەلکترۆنیەکان کە سزایان زۆر زۆرتیا بەهێزە بۆ ڕۆژنامەنووسان تا ئەسی دەستگیرکردن و زیندانیکردن.
So actually sometimes they refer to those laws which are very old laws, and also it's related with the Iraqi laws. So sometimes they refer to those to be able to use it against those journalists to be arrested, and even some of them are being sentenced for many years.
و لە هەمان کاتە بڕیاری frequency space بەکارهێنرێ کە بڕیارێکە بە بێگەڕانەوە بۆ دادگا و هیچ شتێک هەر کاتێک ئاسایش ئاماژە بدا بە وەزارەتی ڕۆشنبیریە بەڕێوەبەرایەتیەکان ئەگەر فشار هەبێ لە پارتە سیاسیەکانەوە کەناڵەکانی ڕاگەیاندن داخرێن وەکو تەلەڤیزیۆن.
Also they have another ways to really put those medias which is a free sequence call, and that even they can very easily shut down those satellite or TV channels that who are speaking against the authority.
ولناو جێبەجێ نەکردنی ئەو یاسایانە لایەنەکان زۆرن کە پابەند نابن بە جێبەجێکردنی یاساوە.
So of course, including those regulation which are not really being used, but at the same time there are some parties which are abusing those laws.
حکومەتی هەرێم بۆ خۆی هیچ پابەند نییە بە جێبەجێکردنی یاساکەوە.
For example, Kurdistan regional government, they don't follow that regulation.
لە دادگاکانی هەرێمی کوردستان ئەو یاسایانە جێبەجێ ناکرێن لەبری ئەوە یاسای سزادانی عێراقی و خراپ بەکارهێنانی مۆبایل
So they don't really apply those laws in the courthouse or in the courts in Iraqi Kurdistan. Instead, they are referring to those Iraqi laws.
هەروەها پەرلەمانی کوردستان چاودێری جێبەجێکردنی ئەو یاسایانە ناکات و کەسیشی بۆ لێک بچینەوە لە بەرامبەر جێبەجێ نەکردنی ئەو یاسایانە بانگێش نەکردووە.
And the role of the lawmakers and the parliament are very weak, which is they don't really follow or they don't investigate with the government to tell them why they are not following those regulations.
ئاڵنگاریەکی دیکە کە زۆر گرنگە بۆم باسی بکەم ئەویش بەکارهێنانی پارەی نەوت و گەندەڵیە لە میدیای حزبی.
Another obstacles or another challenge I would like to refer to is using the money of oils or the sources for those political medias.
ئەگەر لە قۆناغێک بەتەنیا گولە بەکارهێنرابێت لەگەڵ هەڕەش و ترساندن بۆ تیرۆرکردنی ڕۆژنامەنووسانی ئازاد و سەربەخۆ ئێستا بە جۆرێک پارەی گەندەڵی بە جۆرەها شێوە بەکارهێنرێت و میدیا حیزبەکانی پێ بەهێز کراوە بۆ بڵاوکردنەوەی پروپاگەندە.
So if there were way or stages that when they were using bullets to make independent journalists being silenced, being killed, but right now they use those corruption and those money which is they earn from the corruptions to make those independent journalists silent.
ئەمە وای کرد تەنانەت ئەو بەرپرسانەی دەستگای زانیاری و پاراستن و ئاسایش کە سەرجەمیان دەستگای ئەمنین ببنە خاوەن کەناڵی تایبەتی خۆیان لەوێ پروپاگەندی مەترسیدار بکەن.
And that's actually lead to those intelligence which is belonging to those ruling governments or those who are ruling, those parties who are ruling the governments, such as Asaish, which is security, or their intelligence, to really have their own media, and through their own media they will just spread lies to the people.
خاڵێکی تر ئەمێ باسی بکەم مەترسیداری ئەو ڕاگەیاندانە جگەلەوەی ئێستا بۆ منە سەرۆکی حکوومەت، سەرۆکی هەرێم، سەرۆکی کابینەکانی دیکە، سەرۆکی کۆمار، هەرێکێک لەم کەسایەتیانە خاوەن دەستگای ڕاگەیاندنی خۆیانن. ئەمانە ململانی ناوخۆی حیزبەکانیانی پێ ئەکەن و ململانی کەسانی ئازادی خوازی پێ ئەکەن بە جۆرێک هەموو ئەمانە بوونەتە هەڕەشە بۆ سەر ئازادی ڕادەربڕین و ئاشتەوایی کۆمەڵایەتی.
So of course, when we talk about those money when they use for their own benefits, like for their own political party, for example, the Prime Minister of Iraqi Kurdistan region, or the president, or even the president of Iraq. So each of them, they have their own media, and those media being used by them against each other, or against to use it as a conflict, and to use it as a tool to continue those conflicts, and also at the same time to spread lies and to show how those media have been used in inappropriate way.
و دوایین ئاڵنگاری ئەمەوێت لێرە زۆر بە کورتی باسی بکەم لەبەر کاتەکە ئاڵنگاری مافی پیشەیەکانی ڕۆژنامەنووسانە.
And the last one I really want to talk about it is the rights of the as a journalism.
وەک ئەوەی کە ڕۆژنامەنووسەکان زۆربیان ئەچەوسێنرێنەوە لەناو دەستگا ڕاگەیاندنەکانیان و گرێبەستیان بۆ ناکرێت و بیمەی کار و بیمەی تەندروستیان بۆ ناکرێت لە کاتی برینداربوون لە کاتی بەرەنگاربوونی و مەترسی بەرگری یاساییان لێ ناکرێت.
So actually the journalists here are even being oppressed, by those who are sponsoring those media. For example, they don't have such as like health insurance. They don't have those rights, which is it's needed to be provided by those medias, but unfortunately those rights being abused and not being provided by those who are sponsoring those media.
بله بۆیە ئەوەی کە ئێمە لە ئەرزی واقعە ئەیبینین ئەوەیە کە ڕۆژنامە نووسان لەناو مەترسیەک و ژینگەیەکی ڕاستەقینەی مەترسیدار ئەترسن و تەنانەت ڕۆژنامە نووسان بوون بۆ کەسێک کە بەرگری لە مافی گشتی ئەکەن لە کاتێکە مافەکانی خۆشیان چەوسێنراوەتەوە.
So actually, yeah, so that's what's happening here, and those journalists who are bravely, they want to speak against the power, but unfortunately they have been oppressed, and also even their rights been abused, which is at the same time they are asking for the rights of the public opinion, but at the same time their rights being abused.
Thank you so much, Niyaz Khan. Thanks for all the great pointers that you mentioned. I'm going to give the mic to Kamal Chomani. Kamal, he's an independent journalist now. He's living in Germany. He's studying MA, and also he's co-founder of the Kurdistan Times. Kamal, Niyaz Khan, she mentioned about the barriers and the obstacles that the journalists are facing in Iraqi Kurdistan. She mentioned the courts, that they are not charging, or they are not charging the journalists by the journalism law. They are charging them by the Iraqi penal code, and sometimes they are accusing them for doing anti-state activities, something like that, and also misusing technology that currently it used a lot in Iraqi Kurdistan. What do you think about that? What's your point of view?
So thanks a lot, Kamaran, and very happy and very honored that today I'm with you, with all these friends after a long time meeting them virtually. And I'm also very happy that I'm talking in a seminar or in a webinar, which has been organized by the Christian Peacemakers teams. Ever since I met them, I think it was 2010, they have been very consistent in defending human rights, freedom of expression, and also documenting the violations that Turkey and Iran are doing on the border through shelling and airstrikes, killing innocent people. And thanks for you and Niyaz for this great outlook about the Kurdish journalism status at the moment, especially that, with regard to the Kurdistan region of Iraq. And you mentioned that, we are continuing what Serdasht was planning to continue. I would be so proud if I can continue the path that Serdasht Osman did. He gave his ultimate life to defend justice and defend freedom. And you mentioned him. That's why I want to talk a bit about him, because in the next few days it will be his anniversary. So Serdasht Osman was killed because he wrote a satire, and in that satire he criticized the status of corruption, family rule, and a kind of authoritarian regime that the KRG was promoting at that time. So Niyaz talked about that the current cabinet is somehow further consolidating power, and it's somehow different from the other cabinets. What I think, or what I believe, is this current cabinet is just continuation of the former cabinets that has been established by the two ruling parties and two ruling families. And those violations that are happening now, and with regard to your question as well, that right now 5 journalists have been unlawfully convicted on charges of espionage, and 50 other journalists and activists are behind the bars. And these people have been convicted simply because they are defending freedom of expression. And the current cabinet, the difference from the current cabinet, Masroor Barzani is further using his authoritarian rule, something that his father and his cousin from the government and from the presidency couldn't do in the past. And now we are in a stage where, not only the Kurdistan Democratic Party, but even the opposition, the opposition, or the parties who were supposed to be different from the Kurdistan Democratic Party, they are not only opposing, but they are also accepting the status quo that Masroor Barzani has established. That's a very, very dangerous situation. And that's why we are seeing journalists are being convicted on charges of espionage, which they are baseless. And these journalists and activists that have been convicted and they are behind the bars right now, they were convicted because of simply writing on social media. And why Masroor Barzani and the Kurdistan Democratic Party, or let's say the KRG, because this is a KRG decision, not only Masroor Barzani decision, because if it is not the KRG decision, then PUK, the change movement, and they would have taken a very strong position against Masroor Barzani. So they have been convicted because the KDP, they have been able to control all the independent platforms in Kurdistan. They have the mainstream media. As Niyaz said, they have the financial resources from the public budget and also the national resources to fund their media outlets and TVs and local and international programs that they have. So what they had not been able to control was the social media, because social media is not something that's controlled by the KDP and PUK and the government. So Masroor Barzani is taking on the social media activists because they have been able to control the other platforms. And what I think, in this case, it's not only the government who is using his power, but he is using also judiciary, because in Kurdistan, we do not have an independent judiciary. And apart from that, in Kurdistan region of Iraq, Masroor Barzani is also using the intelligence forces and also something that we call Asayish and police. And so because we also do not have independent intelligence, and the intelligence apparatus are completely controlled by the two families and the two ruling parties, he's also using that. In the meantime, he's also using the government rhetoric so as to legitimize what he is doing at the moment against the journalists and activists. In the meantime, he's also using foreign relations of the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and through the diplomatic institutions in the Kurdistan. And not only that, in the Kurdistan region, he's even using his PR machine in the United States and also in the United Kingdom, as well as Europe in general. So he's paying a lot of money from the public budget to the PR companies to promote his authoritarian vision. So I just want to conclude my remarks by one comment. A Human Rights Watch official wrote. She wrote on her Twitter that before, it was the Human Rights Watch was defending the Kurdish journalists and activists in Iran, in Turkey, in Iraq, and Syria, because the Kurdish oppressors were persecuting the Kurdish journalists, freedom activists, and political dissenters. But unfortunately, right now in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, it's no more the Arabs or the Baathists that are persecuting the Kurdish human rights. It is the Kurdish rulers that they are persecuting the Kurdish human rights and freedom of expression and freedom of press in the Kurdistan region, which is very sad, because now we are fighting as a Kurdish nation. Our people are fighting in Iran, in Syria, and in Turkey against a fascist governments and against these kind of authoritarian rulers. But unfortunately, we as the Kurds, despite the fact that we have a Kurdish rule, but we are also facing the same kind of authoritarian regimes that other Kurdish fellows are facing in other parts of Kurdistan.
Thank you so much, Kamal. You mentioned a lot of great points. Actually, what is confusing people, especially people from outside of Kurdistan, that our authorities, and especially the Prime Minister, on the anniversary of Kurdish journalism, they had the congratulatory statements, and they were saying that we provided a golden opportunity to the journalists and the media workers. But now when we are hearing from you and the journalists from Iraqi Kurdistan that there is a lot of obstacles here in Iraqi Kurdistan for preventing journalists to do their work, some people would be confused, especially these people that they don't know about Iraqi Kurdistan or they haven't been here before. Thank you so much. So Niyaz Khan, I'm coming back to you, and I want to ask you, what is the journalist's role to support each other in Iraqi Kurdistan? How can they resist here, and how can they face all these obstacles in Iraqi Kurdistan, and how can they survive?
دەست خۆش بۆ پرسیارە کاک کامەران ئەبێ بڵێن کە ئەوەی لە بەردەم ڕۆژنامەنووسان هەیە ئێستاش بۆ پشتیوانیکردنی یەکتر بەتابەت ئەو ڕۆژنامەنووس سەربەخۆ ئازادانی کە کارەکەن لە هەرێمی کوردستان تەنانەت پشتیوانیکردنی یەکتریش ئێستا لەلایەن حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان و مەسرور بارزانی وەکو ئاستێکی دژایەتیکردنی حکوومەت تەماشا ئەکرێت.
Thank you so much, Kamaran, for your questions. Actually, those type of support among the independent journalists here in Iraqi Kurdistan, which is it's very clear that is the Kurdistan regional government or Masroor Barzani as a prime minister, also they see that as a threat for them.
یەکێک لەو خاڵانەی کە ئێمە تێبینی بکەین و بۆم گرنگە لەوارەیەوە قسەم هەبێت ئەوەیە کە ئەو پشتگیریانەی کە لە نێوان خودی ڕۆژنامەنووسانی سەربەخۆوە ئازاد هەبوون کە بەداخەوە ئێستا بەشێکی هاوڕێک ڕۆژنامەنووسەکانمان بۆی هۆڕەشانی کە لەسەریان لە دەرەوەی عێراق و هەرێمی کوردستانەژین حکوومەت هەر دژایەتی ئەم ئاستەی پشتیوانی ناکات بەڵکو هەوڵ دەدات ئەو ڕێکخراوە ناوەندانی کە بە سەربەخۆیی مابوونەوە بۆ بەرگریکردن لە ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانان ئێستا لە ڕێی پەیوەندی حزبی و پێدانی پارەی گەندەڵی بۆ ڕێکخراوە ناوەندانە ئەوانش بخاتە لیستی گەندەڵکاران و بەکارهێنانی دۆسیەکانی پشتیوانی بۆ بەرەو پێشچوون و نزیکبوونەوەیان لە حکوومەت.
So unfortunately, actually, when we talk about those kind of support among the independent journalists, which is unfortunately some of our colleagues and friends right now, due to the threats, due to those obstacles they have been faced in Iraqi Kurdistan, they had to leave the regions, some of them living outside of Kaj or even outside of Iraq. So that is somehow it's not only to separate from each others, but at the same time there were some independent syndicate or organizations or individuals to support each other, but unfortunately due to the corruption, which is the states here, they use money actually to buy those voices, to buy those independent people and organizations, and to make them silent.
لە خاڵی کۆتاییەوە بەڵگەکانم ئەهێنمەوە.
At the end, I will provide more evidence.
بۆ سندیکای ڕۆژنامەنووسانی کوردستان ئەبێ سندیکایەکی پیشەی بێ بەڵام سندیکایە کە دابەش بۆ بەسەر پارتەکانی دەسەڵات و حزبە سیاسیەکان.
For example, the syndicate of journalists here in Iraqi Kurdistan should be an independent, but unfortunately the members who are running this syndicate are members from the political parties, or the political parties hire those people to be in that position.
It would be great if you shorten your speech. It would be great because of the time. I am so sorry.
بەسەرچاوە هاوکات ئەوەی کە پەیوەندی بە ڕێکخراوەکانی کۆمەڵی مەدەنیەوە هەبێ ئێستا ئێمە تێبینیەکەین ئەو ڕێکخراوانی کە بۆ بەرگریکردن لە مافی ڕۆژنامەنووسان کاریانە کرد دەرفەتیان پێدرێت سەرۆکی هەرێم سەرۆکی حکوومەت وتەبێژی حکوومەت ببینن بۆ ئەوەی راپۆرتەکانیان پێ بدرێ و ئەو ناوڕۆکی راپۆرتانی کە سەرۆکی هەرێم و سەرۆکی حکوومەت وەریان گرتووە هەمووی بریتین لەو تاوان و ئەشکەنجە و پێشێلکاریانی کە لە بەرامبەر ڕۆژنامەنووسان ئەنجامدراوە و خۆیان لێ بەرپرسن.
Actually, some of those who are running those independent organizations or somehow to advocate for the rights of the journalism here, sometimes they have opportunity to meet with the prime minister or the president and to deliver those reports have been recorded, especially about those violations against the human rights and or against the journalists, and those reporters are very clearly mentioned about those abuses, and they deliver that report, but still they don't follow and to do anything to change that.
ئەم نمایشانەیان لەگەڵ سندیکای ڕۆژنامەنووسان و ڕێکخراوەکانی بەرگریکردن لە ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانی تەنیا بۆ ئەوەیە کە بڵێن ئێمە بایەخ بە دۆسیی ڕۆژنامەوانی دێن، بەڵام لە کردار نەخێر جاری تر دووپاتێکەمەوە کە پێشێلکاری و لە ناوبردنی ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانی استراتیژی ئەم کابینەی حکومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان.
So actually we can name that only like a makeup. So when they meet with those people, so they just to show to the public that they really care about the journalism work here or the independent journalists, but at the same time in the reality, so the reality is telling us something different, and they just wanted to make up their to cover their bad things.
بەپێی هەموو بەڵگانەی کە هەمانە ئێستا هەرێمی کوردستان لە خراپترین و مەترسیدارترین ناوچەکانەوە دڵنیام لە سەرۆکی حکومەت و تیمەکەی و پارتە سیاسەکانی دەسەڵات بۆیان بگونجێت ڕۆژنامەنووسانی سەربەخۆوەک و سەفدەش عوسمان و سۆرانی مام محەممەد و تەواوی ڕۆژنامەنووسانی تر تیرۆرەکەن و دڵنیام بۆیان بکرێت و خاشقچی پارچە پارچەمانەکە.
I'm sure the situation here for the journalists are in the worst time, and those who are in power, they can, if they have more opportunity, they can very easily, even to our destiny will be the same destiny of Khashoggi, that they can very easily put our body, like make our bodies in parties, and to not have any more strong voices from the independent journalists.
Thank you so much, Niyaz Khan. Kamal, Niyaz Khan, she mentioned that there is some local organizations here in Iraqi Kurdistan. They are saying we are protecting the rights of the journalists, but they are not doing their work very well. So what do you think about the international organizations, what they should do for protecting the human rights defenders and the journalists in Iraqi Kurdistan? If you could please briefly explain for us, it would be great. And also I want to remind the attendances that we are close to the end of the webinar. If you have any question, you still have time, you can put it in the Q&A section that you can see in the below of your screen. Mike is yours, Kamal.
Yeah, so very briefly, you know, even the local defending journalists organizations and syndicates, it's not a problem about them. It's rather a problem with regard to the political system. The political system is not a democracy. And once you do not have a democracy, so you cannot have civil society, you cannot have syndicates that can do their work. Sometimes those syndicates and those independent organizations in Kurdistan, or so-called independent organizations, they really want to protect the journalists, but they even by themselves are under threat of the current system. They either by direct threatening or sometimes using the financial resources by the government or by the political parties to buy them, and that's a problem. And for instance, we do have some organizations that they sometimes report about the violations. Even the Syndicate of Journalists of Kurdistan, which is KDP and PUK and other political parties, yet they have a committee which they document the violations. And in documenting the violations of freedom of expression and journalistic violation, they have been quite good, to be honest. And they have documented, but the problem is, the government doesn't care about anything because it is not a democratic government. And concerning the international organizations have been doing quite good in terms of documenting and reporting about the violations in the Kurdistan region. However, because Iraq as a state where there have been war after 2003, the US invasion, so the international organizations sometimes they have been misled by the PR of the KRG and also the propaganda of the other Iraq, and there is a kind of democratic model in the Kurdistan region. And to be honest, after 2003 until 2009 and 10, there was a kind of freedom of expression in Kurdistan where free media could survive. But afterward, the things have changed, and the international organizations, they have also somehow changed. And if you look at the reports without borders, CPJ, Freedom House, and Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch organization, including CPT, all these organizations and also international media, recently they have documented and they have reported about the human rights and freedom of expression and violation in the Kurdistan region. But the problem is, just to complete my words, the problem is the KRG, which is very, very funny. They have an institute, and the institute, which is led by one of the Masr Barzani circles, is called an institute to reply the international reports, which is very funny. How can a government establish an institute just to reply the international reports? And all the reports, they have always denied what the international organizations have provided and have documented concerning the human rights violations and freedom of expression violations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kamal. So we are continuing this conversation with answering the questions from the attendances, but yeah, you mentioned about you both mentioned about the Badinan prisoners that now almost 76 journalists and civil activists have been in prison since August last year. 5 of them, they were convicted of doing anti-state activities in Iraqi Kurdistan. So CPT, in the beginning of the arresting these people, we launched a campaign, and we have some public actions to advocate for their rights and ask the KRG government to release all these prisoners. So we're gonna put the link of the public action in the chat boxes, so you can if you're interested to do any public action, you can click on the link and do a public action that it would be in the chat boxes. Thank you so much. We have received some questions. I gonna ask you these questions. So Ignacio Delgado, he asked you that after convicted Sherwan Sherwani, Gudar Zebari, and Ayaz Karam in February this year, how do you see, how do you feel about the expressing your opinions or your ideas in Iraqi Kurdistan? This question is for you both. It would be great if you answer me in 1 minute. Kamal, mic is yours.
Yeah, so sorry, can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, after convicting the 3 journalists on 16th of February this year, Ayaz Karam, Sherwan Sherwani, and Guhdar Zebari, how do you feel about expressing your opinions in Iraqi Kurdistan and write about corruption?
Yeah, so for me, it might be quite different, especially that I'm abroad right now. But for my fellow journalists, there are lots of levels of censorship. First, there's a huge self-censorship in Kurdistan. Before you write, you know what you write, and you always are aware. so as not to write about things that you will be facing the same, the same destiny that Sardar Osman or other journalists are have faced, including the Badinan activists and prisoners. So, there are lots of things that it's not easy to write about. For example, to talk about the families, to talk about corruption, talk about foreign regional affairs of Kurdistan, to talk about oil and natural resources, and to talk about the history of the oppression and betrayals of the political parties. However, what I also want to talk about, there are a lot of censorship from the independent and free media journalists. On the other side, from the political party media outlets, they are free to say whatever they want in terms of how to attack the others, including they use a very fascist, racist, sexist language and very xenophobic language when they write. For example, just a few days ago, one of the media outlets belonging to Masroor Barzani just told, a PUK member of parliament, a prostitute, just because she said in Iraq, in one of the TV stations, that Masroor Barzani represents this political party, not the entire Kurdish nation. So imagine, they deal with the free speech in the way which is very racist, very sexist, very xenophobic, and fascist language. On the other side, the Kurdish journalists and especially citizen journalists right now are not free, or they cannot even express themselves or to report about corruption.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kamal. Niyaz Khan, do you feel safe right now in Iraqi Kurdistan to write about the corruption or exposing corruption and criticizing the political parties after convicting these three journalists? Could you please tell us or answer us very briefly?
خاڵێکی گرنگ کە ئەمەوێ باسی بکەم بریتیە لەوەی کە حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان هێشتا ئامادە نیە لە بەردەم ڕێکخراونە دەوڵەتیەکانی بەرگریکردن لە ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانی و مافەکانی مرۆڤ و لە بەردەم راپۆرت و دۆسیەکانی پێشێرکاری لە ناوخۆی هەرێمی کوردستان دان بنێت بەوەی کە ئەو کارانە کاری نایاسایی نائەخلاقی و جۆرە کارێکن کە تەواو لە پێناو لە باربردنی ئازادی ڕادربڕین و ئازادی کاری ڕۆژنامەوانیە.
So one thing is really I want to mention that it's until this moment the KRG is not really ready or doesn't want to really to prove that those reports has been presented by those international organizations about the human rights violations, about the violations against the journalism, which is until now they don't really approve that, and they always saying that those are not true.
تەنانەت ئەوەی کە حکوومەتی هەرێم دیاری کردو بۆ ناوی فەرمانگەی وەڵامدانەوەی راپۆرتە نێودەوڵەتیەکان گەڕاوم تەنانەت لە کۆریای باکووری شتیوانیە.
Actually, that department, which is called replying to the international reports, we have it here in Iraqi Kurdistan. I made a research. I even didn't find it in North Korea.
بۆیە لە دوای ئەو دۆسی دادگاییکردنەوە کۆمەڵێشت ڕوویان داوە بەڵام ئەم پێشتانە لە پێشێلکاری هەمیشە پێشینیان هەبووە بەڵام ئێستا مەسرور بارزانی بە تەواوی دەستکراوەترە لەگەڵ حکوومەتەکەی و لەگەڵ پارتە سیاسیەکانی دیکە کە هاوبەشن لە حکوومەت لەگەڵی بۆی ئامادە بێت هەموو جۆرێک لە پێشێلکاری و سەرکوتکاری ئەنجام بدات.
So actually these violations are not really new for us, which is but it's this time the difference is that the Masroor Barzani, the prime minister, including those political parties who are part of the government or part of his cabinet, are also somehow collaborating to make this to make journalists, independent journalists, silent.
ئەمە خاڵێک باز بکەم کە کەمترین کات باسی ئەکرێت. بڕاستە ڕۆژنامەنووسان بەڕفاندن بە قوشتن بە جۆرەها شێوازی پێشێلکاری ڕوبەڕووی مەترسی بووینەتەوە بەڵام ئەمەیە بڵێن بۆ ئێمە وەکو ڕۆژنامەنووسانی ژن بەردەوام ڕوبەڕووی هەڕەشەی دەستدرێژی سێکسێ بینەوە تەنانەت دوای دادگایکردنەکەش بەهۆی ئەو قسانی کە کردمان بۆ دژایەتیکردنی یا قبوڵمەکردنی بڕیارێکی نادات پەروەرانە کە لە بەرامبەر هاوڕێیانی ڕۆژنامەنووسانی بادیناندران لەو ڕۆژەوە تا ئێستا بە جۆرەها شێوە هەڕەشەمان لێکرێت.
Unfortunately, despite of all those violations against journalists or independent journalists in general, I, as a woman, are facing another types of abuses, which is sexual abuses and insulting my gender. And also that's something that since that day when I speak out against the decision that's made to convince the journalists in Badinan. So since that day, I'm receiving many different types of sexual harassment and threats.
ئەو لە کاتێکە ئەم قسانە ئەکەن کە هەمیشە نمایشی ئەوەکەن کە ئەوان بەرگری لە هاتنە پێشەوەی ژنانەکەن کە کاتکەن لە مەیدان.
And this is at the same time they always make a propaganda about that, which is they always support women to become a journalist and to work in this sector.
Thank you so much, Niyaz Khan. Thank you so much, Kamal Chomani.
Thanks, Kamaran. I think that in the QA there are two questions that I could reply just very shortly, if you allow me.
Yes, I would allow you.
Okay.
There is two questions about. They are asking that people from outside of Kurdistan, some people they are Kurdish and some people like the foreigner people outside of Kurdistan. What can they do to support you as journalists and support the journalists in Iraqi Kurdistan? So if you are answering that in one or two sentences, what do you say, Kamal? Because time is not helping us. In two sentences, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I want to answer two questions. One Dastan raised and the other Megan raised concerning first how they support Kurdish or others in diaspora can support the Kurdish journalism. I think the Kurdistan regional government have been established through the international support, and apart from educating yourself and talking to the local journalists and supporting them, and sometimes opening their opportunities for them to also to educate themselves in terms of journalism, it will be so helpful. In the meantime, you can, like the Kurdish, especially the Kurdish in diaspora, they can write letters to their members of parliament or to their local, local representatives, so that to talk to their, foreign policy or the government is that the Kurdistan regional government needs to be, told and called out in terms of freedom of expression, because these governments, especially the United States and also the EU countries, they are hugely supporting the Kurdistan regional government. They are aiding the Kurdistan regional government. It should be conditional. It should not be unconditional. And the second question I wanted to answer, Megan raised concerning this diplomatic, it's for the first time that diplomatic missions in Iraq and also Kurdistan region, they have raised their concerns about this authoritarian measures that Masroor Barzani has started. They have really understood that what Masroor Barzani is doing is further destabilizing the Kurdistan region. And for the international community, it is not only democracy, it's more, for them, stability is the most important thing. And what Masroor Barzani is doing through these authoritarian measures is destabilizing the Kurdistan region, and not only victimizing the kind of stability that there is, it also kills for generations the democratic dreams that we have. So I think the diplomatic missions are very serious, and they also try to tell Masroor Barzani, unfortunately he has not understood, that they are serious, that he should understand this cannot be continuing, because in the Kurdistan region is not Saudi Arabia. Masroor Barzani and KDP, they only might have 20 or 25% of support of the population. And the support is through the iron fist that the KTB has been doing, and also through the financial natural resources that they have. That's why this kind of authoritarian measures doesn't work in the Kurdistan region. And luckily, the diplomatic missions have understood. And I think we should also support them in further pressuring the KRG and also the KTB source to stop this kind of measures.
Thank you so much. Niyaz Khan, what do you think about that? That the Kurdish people in diaspora and the international activists around the world, what should they do to support journalists here?
کامران قسەکانم بەخاڵ و زۆر بەپەلە ئەڵێم بۆ ئەوەی لەبەر چاودێری ڕەچاوی کاتەکە بکەم. یەکەم زۆر گرنگە ئەو راپۆرتانی کە دەرئەچن لەبارەی هەرێمی کوردستان و دۆسیەی پێشێرکاری ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانی بە بەڵگەنامەیی بکرێن.
It's very important those reports have been presented by those international organizations about the human rights violation in Iraq. So those needs to be documented.
و ئەم ڕێکخرا و کەسایەتیە بەرگریکارانی ئازادی ڕادەربڕین و مافەکانی مرۆڤ ئەتوانن لە ڕێگەی ئەو بەڵگە و دۆسیانەی کە هەن فشار بکەنە سەر حکوومەتەکانیان. یەکەم بۆ نمونە ئەم بەرپرسە سیاسیانی کە ڕۆڵیان هەیە لە ئەنجامدانی تاوان و کوشتن و پێشڕێکاری لە ناو هەرێمی کوردستان ڤیزایان پێ نەدرێ بۆ ئەوەی سەفەر بکەن.
So, for example, very simple steps they can take. So those leaders who are here being somehow in charge of killing or kidnapping those independent journalists. So those countries should not give them visa anymore and to let them to travel.
و خاڵی دووەم زۆربەی ئەو سەرکردە سیاسیانە کە ئێستا تاوان لە بەرامبەر ڕۆژنامەنووسان و تیرۆرکردن ئەنجامەدەن ناسنامەی وڵاتێکی دیکەی ئەوروپی یان ئەمریکیان هەیە.
And also some of those leaders who are here in Iraqi Kurdistan, some of them really have their second citizenships, and those citizenships should be withdrawn and not provided for them.
تکە لە ڕێگەی هەوڵدان بۆ دەرکردنی بڕیاری نوێ و بخستنە ڕووی بەڵگەکان شیاوی ئەوەیە کە ناسنامەی ئەو وڵاتانیان لێ بسەندرێتەوە.
I think it's very important that to withdraw their second nationalities due to those violations and abuses against us as an independent journalist.
و خاڵی کۆتاییم ئەوەیە لەو هاریکاریی کە پێشکەشی ئەکەن بۆ بەرەنگاربوونەوەی تیرۆر و شەڕی داعش، ئێمە هیچ کات لاریمان نییە بۆ ئەوەی کە پشتیوانی بکرێت بۆ بەرەنگاربوونەوەی تیرۆر، بەڵام ناکرێت ئەو چەکانی کە وڵاتەکان لە دەرەوە ئەیدەن بۆ سەرکوتکردنی خۆپێشاندان و ڕۆژنامەنووسان و ترساندنیان بەکاربێن. بۆیە شیاوی ئەوەیە لەگەڵ هەر جۆرە هاریکاریە کە پێشکەش بە هەرێمی کوردستان ئەکرێت مەرجی دیموکراتیزەکردنی هەرێمی کوردستانی لەگەڵ بێت.
So actually one thing or last thing I want to mention that as we hear that for example those military supplies being provided for the Iraqi Kurdistan due to the fight against terrorism, so those weapons being provided for the KRG, so those needs to be in conditional, so like because sometimes they use the same weapons to threat journalists, they use the same weapons to kill and assassinate journalists and independent journalists. So there must be conditions that if any military supplies comes to Iraqi Kurdistan in solidarity with the government to defeat terror, so there must be condition that's also to provide democracy and an atmosphere for the freedom of expression.
Thank you so much, Niyaz Khan and Kamal, for this conversation and discussion. And we as CPT, we really appreciate your amazing work in Iraqi Kurdistan and for the Kurdish journalism. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I would love to tell you that we have a CPT website in the box chat that you can see it there. You can learn more about the freedom, the situation of the freedom of speech in Iraqi Kurdistan, and also about the cross-border bombings in Iraqi Kurdistan, which is held by Turkey and also Iran. And also CPT is based on the donation. If you hear something resonating you, it would be great if you donate. There is a link in the box chat if you interested to donate and continue our work in Iraqi Kurdistan. It would be great. And also there is some other links, Kamal Chomani Twitter account, and also Niyaz Abdulla Facebook account. You can follow them and learn more about their work in Iraqi Kurdistan. Thank you so much. Zor spas.